Lucy's Kitchen. It's Lucy's Kitchen. Do-do-do-do-do-do. Lucy's Kitchen. Lucy's Kitchen. Lucy's Kitchen. It's Lucy's Kitchen. Lucy's Kitchen. Lucy's Kitchen. Oh yeah. Lucy's Kitchen. She's Lucy and she's got a kitchen. Lucy's Kitchen.
And now that we've got your attention, let's cook. Hello, welcome to Lucy's Kitchen. I'm Lucy and this is my kitchen. Today we're going to learn how to make a Moroccan Tagine, a stew featuring the distinctive flavors of North Africa. This is a tagine, and this is where the stew gets its name. It's a very special clay pot uniquely designed to sit on top of a flame. The tagine is made of two parts. It has a sort of a bottom dish. That's where all of the vegetables and meats go. And then the top. And what happens is as it cooks, as it simmers, it steams. And the steam goes up here in the inside of this beautiful ceramic cover. And then it drips down and bastes the food. So you don't have to use very much liquid, if any liquid, because the vegetables and the meats and so forth, they have their own juices. You end up with a beautifully, absolutely wonderful, highly flavored dish. So tagines come in lots of different sizes. This one is a very small one. It was brought to me from the Middle East as a gift, and I think that would be enough to make a very small dish or a side of vegetables. And this one is, I'd say, large enough for 2 or 3 good-sized servings, maybe even 4. There are larger ones that are made of, the bottom is made of cast iron, but they still have a ceramic top. And there are some that are all cast iron. This one I just love. I think it's so beautiful. And for me, the tagines are a lovely thing to just have up on a shelf. And if you don't have a tagine, it's not the end of the world. You can cook this dish in a regular Dutch oven. Tagines give you a perfectly cooked dish without a lot of moisture. And it's just the perfect thing to put on top of couscous. And couscous we think of it as a grain, but it's really a pasta. It looks like a tiny grain, but it's really pasta that they have. It's semolina that has been boiled and then dried, and it's just a perfect thing. So in this country, we have the good fortune of having couscous that is sort of pre-cooked, and all we have to do is add boiling liquid to it, and we are good to go. It takes 5 minutes. In North Africa, to make couscous is a very, very big deal. They have a special pot called a couscousier, which has a bottom part, and then it has another top part. The top part is kind of like a basket. They're usually made of some sort of metal, but the top part has perforations in it, and the bottom part, it holds the stew. So while the stew cooks, with its steam, it starts to steam the grains of couscous, and they puff up and they start to get cooked. However, they're not really done. You have to take them out and put them on a big towel, and then break them up, and then sprinkle them with water, and then put them back in there. So usually it takes several hours to make a true couscous. But we're going to take our shortcuts, and we're lucky we have them. Let's get started with our tagine, and we're going to begin by cutting up some vegetables. Well, now we'll put our tagine aside, and we'll talk about what's in it. So in my tagine, I've got some parsley and some mint. We've got a small, very small butternut squash, an onion, got a carrot, a couple of summer squashes. I've got some baby turnips. And if you don't have babies, that's okay. You can use just a normal turnip. Oops, there it goes. And I've got apricots. Okay, this is the main stuff. And then I've got some lemons. But I also have these amazing dried figs. And then, of course, the spices we're going to use. So this particular tagine is going to feature boneless, skinless chicken thighs. Or you can use chicken breast and chicken, and they both cook very quickly. We're going to start with the hardest thing, which is peeling and cutting up a butternut squash. I picked a very small one, but what you can do is you can just get a normal size one and only use half of it or a third of it, depending on how big it is. This one's going to probably produce about what we need for this dish. So really, it's not as hard as it looks. This thing is hard as can be. A butternut squash, you probably have to feel like you have to take an axe to it to cut it in half. But I think we'll be able to do it by peeling it first and then cutting it in half. So I'm just using a regular vegetable peeler, and I'm just taking it and just scraping it along the side of the squash, which isn't easy. It definitely is not easy, but it doesn't matter because it kind of goes like a big apple. Once you get it going, you sort of get the pleasure of pulling this tough skin off. And you want to get down as far as the orange flesh, because the orange flesh is the part that we especially want to eat. We don't really want to eat the white pithy parts. So we're just going to keep going until we get this whole thing peeled. It's all peeled, so now we're going to try to cut it up. Cut off the stem, and then cut off this first part. This first part is the solid part. And so you can see there's just a little bit of this seedy part in here, and you can scoop that out pretty easily. And then this, we're going to cut off the tail, which is still pretty hard. Be very careful. And get rid of that. Okay, and then I'm going to cut it in half. So we've got the seeds, and we've got the part that has pretty much no seeds. And I think we'll use, I like to use a spoon to just scrape the center part out. So here is what it looks like when I'm doing that. You just scrape it out and pull all that stuff out. And then you want to get the sort of the stringy part. You don't want to have it to be too stringy. Put that aside. That's ready to go. And then we'll do the same with the other part. So this is like scraping a pumpkin. I'm sure that you have at one time or another made a jack-o'-lantern at the holidays. Something's on my glasses. So it's the same idea. And then we're going to cut this into little chunks. This also makes a nice hat. This part we're just going to cut into slices. Then we've got these nice, almost even pieces. And everything's about, inch and a half, 2 inches long. So I'm going to put all of this into a little dish and set it aside. This is really kind of hard to cut, so don't let your knife slip on you, and it could easily happen. So just be very aware of how hard it is, and make sure you've got a good sharp knife, not a dull knife. A dull knife is much more likely to cut you and hurt you than a sharp knife if you're using it properly. So I'm just going to get rid of the insides of the butternut squash, and we'll move on. As long as we're working on squash, I think we'll cut up the patty pan squash and the zucchini. So just cut the ends off. And again, we're looking to have pieces about the same size so that they cook evenly. And these are not going to be too tiny, but they're not that big either. So I'm going to put these in here. And we'll slice up this little adorable squash. And this, we have a lot of choices. We could do it in little wedges. We could do it in slices. I think I'd like to do it in wedges so that you can really kind of see it. It's so cute, especially in yellow. You hardly ever see these. It makes it for an attractive dish when you have a variety of colors. And Moroccan food is quite attractive for that very reason. Perfect. And I peeled one large carrot, which I'm now cutting into, I'd say about 1 inch by 1/2 inch pieces. These are also going in here with our main vegetables. Next thing I'm going to chop up are the figs. Now these are quite dry, and that's okay because they'll reconstitute when they're in the stew. And so for these, I think I'm going to use my medium knife. So cut off the stem because it's very hard. Then cut it in half. Take a look. That's probably okay, just cutting it in half. We're using, oh yeah, these are great. Cutting it in half is probably a good idea. This one is huge, so I'm going to cut it into thirds. And this one doesn't seem to have a stem. Here's one perfect example. Now, when you see these fresh in the store, I only see them for maybe 2 or 3 weeks a year, and I can't get enough of them. They are so good in salads, with goat cheese, with, I don't know, anything. Really, you can just eat them. They're so good. And anyway, so it has that nice little pear shape. And then it's full of seeds, but the seeds are innocuous. Well, when I was growing up in a Greek household, my mother would buy dried figs, and they were usually either from Greece or from Turkey. And they used to come on a string, so they would tie a string in them. They looked like a big fig necklace, and I was fascinated by them, but I didn't want to even taste them because I was worried what in the world this dried thing could taste like. And of course, they're sublime. They're so marvelous. And as an adult, I've really, really enjoyed having dried figs. They would dry them because, as I mentioned earlier, the fig season is only maybe a couple of weeks old for fresh figs. So you can't keep them in your refrigerator for very long. They don't last. You have to eat them right away. With dried figs, obviously, you'll have them all winter long. And that was one of the things, because fig trees really produce a lot of figs, especially in the Middle East, and that's about where most of them come from. Now, Moroccan food calls for something called preserved lemons. That's when you cut up lemons into wedges, and you also, you have to cut up maybe, 10, 15 lemons, and you squish them into a crock and press them down so all the juice starts to come out. And then you layer them with salt, and you allow them to sit covered in lemon juice and salt for a period of time, a couple of weeks, I think, at least. And then they use those. They just wash off the salt, and they use them in Moroccan cooking. I am not personally very fond of preserved lemons. I know they're authentic, but I do love lemons. So we're just going to use lemons, and it's okay. You can just use a lemon rather than preserved lemons. They do give a distinctive lemon flavor, but I like the flavor of lemons any way they come. So what I'm going to do is just take one lemon, leave the peel on, and I'm going to just cut it into little wedges. And right there in the center is a little membrane, so we'll cut that off and get this into some more wedges. Okay, so I'm going to put them all in here till we're ready to use them. And then my next ingredient, in my case, I'm using fresh apricots that a friend gave me from their tree. Apricots are easy to find in this part of the country, but they're not that easy to find in other parts of the country. And just like figs, they're usually available all year round in the dried form. But since we have fresh apricots, I'm going to indulge and put fresh apricots into our stew. The way you prepare them is you just cut them in half. There's a little seam around the edge. They look like tiny, tiny peaches, and you don't have to peel them, which is really fantastic. So we're just going to cut them around and take the pit out, which just pops right out, and they'll be easy to use. Now we are going to reserve the apricots until towards the end of cooking and add them just at the end, because we don't want them to get completely mushy or disappear. They're such a special treat. But if we were using dried apricots, we would put them in with the rest of the ingredients. My first experience with apricots came last year when I got 2 sacks full of apricots from my friend. I had no idea what to do with them. And so I know it sounds crazy, but where I came from, we didn't have apricots, and I don't have an apricot tree in my yard. So when someone gave me all these apricots, of course I couldn't say no. I was really happy to say yes, because I could learn something new. So I learned that A, they were easy to cut in half, and B, you didn't have to peel them, and C, therefore they were super easy to make into jam. Just add a little bit of lemon juice and a little grated lemon peel and some sugar, and then just boil them down, and as soon as they thicken up, they're ready. And then you can just put them in jars and put them in your freezer. It's really wonderful. So here's my apricots. We'll put them in a little dish. Next, I'm going to just cut up an onion and add that to my ingredients. I also have a clove of garlic somewhere, and if not, I'll get another one. This onion is gorgeous, isn't it? Look at that. It's a red onion. It's locally grown. I received it with an entire head of onion greens, which were incredible to use in another dish. I've already peeled all the papery skin off, and now it's ready to go. What we're going to do is just slice it into tiny wedges, and they will so that they'll cook and caramelize evenly, because they'll all be about the same size, and they'll look very pretty too. I'm not sure how much of this red color this onion will retain in cooking, and as a matter of fact, that's kind of a problem with some of the dishes, is that when you start with the ingredients, they are the most beautiful, colorful ingredients you've ever seen. And then when you cook it, suddenly everything kind of turns brownish. Now, we do retain a bit of our color here because this dish cooks fairly quickly. But that's one reason we garnish with parsley at the end. And we're going to garnish with parsley and mint. Here I've got some of that pesky mint from my garden. I'm going to whip it into shape. Just strip it off those hard stems. Make sure you don't get any of those stems in the mix. Just kidding. But it is better without them. Now, you can use as much mint as you want or as little as you want. And just a little tiny bit of mint is fine. If you're fond of it, you could also put a little cilantro in here. And, all right, here we go. It's chopping time. Now that we're finished peeling and dicing and chopping things, we're going to move on to the seasonings in this. Moroccan food is beautifully seasoned. North Africa is known for its spice markets. whenever I think of tagine or think of Morocco, I just think about the souk, which is the market that you see in the movies with big piles of spices. And you can imagine how fragrant and wonderful that would be. So they have incorporated that into their food. And it's one of the, for me, it's one of the most exciting cuisines in the world. We're going to use a few ingredients here, and I'm going to just tell you a little bit about each of them. First of all, we're going to use a pinch of saffron. Saffron goes a long way, and it has a distinctive flavor. It's made of the stamens. You can't see this, I know, but it's little stamens of from a particular flower. I'm not sure I can tell you which one, and that's probably about enough. We're going to just squish it a little bit with our fingers and grind it up. Put that aside. We're going to use something called ras al hanout. Now, this is the ultimate North African seasoning. Ras al hanout, and sounds very exotic, I'm sure. It's a combination of cinnamon, turmeric, nutmeg, pepper, cardamom, and it has cloves. So this combination of seasoning will give this dish its Moroccan distinctive flavor. And you can make your own. You can certainly look up recipes for ras al hanout, but it's also pretty readily available now. We have a lot of good international food markets, and I'd happen to have made this myself. Then we're going to use something called za'atar. And za'atar has thyme. It has sumac, which is a berry, a very tart berry that almost tastes lemony. It has sesame seed, and it has salt. This is used all over the Middle East. It's used in kebabs, and it's used on yogurt and different kinds of sauces. It's one of the most popular sauces in the Middle East, so we're going to use a little bit of that. And now our two kinds of spices are in together. And I'm going to add some coriander because I like the flavor. We're not going to add too much, just half a teaspoon. But coriander is the ground up seed that eventually becomes cilantro. But it's very different flavor, and it adds a distinctly North African, Middle Eastern flavor. And since it's not in either of our spice mixtures, I'm just going to add it myself. Now, there's no cumin in this, but there could be. I'm just not going to add it. So I'm going to just stir that up, and when it's time, we'll throw that in, and we'll be ready to go. Well, we've cut up a lot of ingredients and put together lots of good spices. I think we're ready to make our stew. And we have to take our tagine over to the stove, and that's where we're going to combine all of our ingredients. So I'm going to start with a little olive oil. Okay, that seems like that's pretty warm. That's about a tablespoon of olive oil, and I'm going to add a tablespoon of butter. Get them going together. I have it now on the lowest setting. As soon as we have this butter melted, I think I might as well turn it up. I'm going to add the onions and garlic. I'm going to add the chicken. I've already cut up the chicken in 1 to 2 inch pieces. You want to make sure this is all nicely browned. Turn it up a little. As soon as the chicken loses its pink color, we're good to go. Let's take a look. Oh, that's great. What we're seeing now is that the chicken has lost that pink raw color, And so the next thing we want to do is we want to put the spices in. We want them to go in early in the process because the longer, first of all, the fat in the sautéing process is going to make the flavor of all of these spices come out more than if we just threw it in later. This way you kind of simmer the spices in the fat, and there's not a lot of fat, but you get my point. And then it really kind of shifts it and allows it to become concentrated. And it sure does smell good. Now I'm going to add the butternut squash. I'm going to add the carrots, turnips, and zucchini. Woo! We're getting quite a pile of stuff here. And I'm going to add the figs. Now look at how pretty that is. Isn't that amazing? Oh, it's gorgeous. I just love this. Now, wouldn't it be nice if it stayed like this forever? But it won't. It'll change color. It'll lighten up, but that's okay. At least for 1 minute, we're really getting a gorgeous looking thing. I'm going to tuck the lemons in around the dish. That sure adds to its gorgeous look. There's one there. Okay, one there. And I'm going to put a tiny bit of broth on here. Like maybe 1/4 of a cup. That's it. All right, use a mitt if this is hot. And voila, now we're going to just have it simmer on its lowest setting. So while the tagine is simmering, we're going to make the couscous. As I said before, it's a very easy process. I've got my pan preheating and there's nothing in it at the moment. I'm going to add some olive oil and some butter, just like I did when I put together the tagine. A little olive oil and a little butter. And that's about a tablespoon. And as soon as that melts, I'm going to add 1 cup of vegetable broth. Now we'll let that come to a rapid boil. Perfect. Now just turn the heat off and throw 1 cup of couscous in there and stir it, cover it, and forget it. So it's been cooking for about 15 minutes. I'm going to give it a look-see. Looks pretty good. It's boiling along. I'm going to test the vegetables and see how they're doing. They're a little bit hard. I'd say we need about 15 more minutes. So since we're kind of moving along, I'm going to go ahead and add the apricots. Minutes. Let's give it a check. Well, it looks really good. Just test it with my knife point. Everything I'm touching so far seems pretty tender. Aha. The turnips just a little bit hard. Push them in a little. And it won't hurt it to cook just a little longer. There's a turnip right up here. And so I would say that if you make this dish at home, put the turnips on the bottom and it'll cook faster. But everything else is really looking good. We'll just let it cook for a few more minutes and check it again. So the couscous comes out kind of flat, And we just take a big fork. Now this is one of my favorite forks. It's called a blending fork. I use it all the time, but you can use any fork. And you just start to fluff it. You try to break up the lumps. And I'm going to just set it down, finish it up. This fork does a pretty good job of doing that, breaking up the lumps. And you get something kind of like this. I can't wait. Oh. So, first thing we do is to serve it. I've got a nice dish with a little bit of a lip so that it'll catch any juices. And I'm going to take some of the couscous, make a circle, then I'm going to open that circle up. And here we go. Oh, that smells as good as it looks. I can't wait to taste some of this delicious tagine. Those colors, they're fantastic. The vegetables have held their shape. Nothing is overly cooked, and there's some nice juice underneath. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to just take a little bit going all the way down. Getting some of that chicken, some of the squash, the vegetables, zucchini, and the olives, and a piece of that lemon. Take some of the juice, and we want to make sure we get a little bit of that on the couscous. And just take a little bit of the parsley and sprinkle it on top. You have a dish that's worthy of your best company. And it's fun to serve because it's really, really pretty. So really you can bring this whole tagine to the table and let everybody help themselves to the couscous. Tell everyone to make the circle as we did, and then serve them at the table. When you lift the lid, I think you'll hear some oohs and ahs. I would also recommend putting some mint and parsley on the top of the tagine to just make a little color, garnish it, and you've got a great dinner. You can also take a little bit of the chopped mint and throw that on here. It will give it a little bit of an extra delicious flavor. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and make sure to tune in next time for more recipes from my kitchen to yours.